What's the creepiest true story you have, or one someone has told you? My grandmother's uncle was a trader and lived on the border of Afghanistan-Pakistan. He would use camels and donkeys to move his goods. This is before cars were readily available in that part of the world. She told me that one night while going through the desert alone with 2 camels and a donkey, he heard someone call his name. When he turned to see who it was, he said he saw beings that were so tall that their heads looked like they were touching the clouds. So anyway, he left his camels right then and there and jet using his donkey. When he reached his sister's house a couple hours, he explained what he had seen and that he was in a lot of pain. He died about 2 hours later. When they were washing his body for burial, Muslims usually bury within 24 hours or less, they saw that he had a single hand imprint that stretched across the entirety of his back. From his right thigh all the way to his left shoulder. One hand print. That was freaking scary. Also, my brother was possessed as an infant. He would not eat and would cry when the lights were on, and he would talk to something in baby language when the lights were off and my parents weren't in the room. If they were in the room with him, he would stay eerily quiet in the dark. My parents took him to a Muslim exorcist, and when the thing got out of him, he drank 3 bottles of milk and drank milk from my mom till she was dry. He hadn't eaten in almost 3 days. In 2007, I was living with my parents in Alaska while I attended college. They lived in a nice 3-level house in an upscale part of the city. My room was in the downstairs, the middle floor was the kitchen and living areas, and my parents' room was on the top level. The kitchen was directly above my room, and since it had a tile floor, I could always very clearly hear it when someone was in the kitchen. One morning in early March, I was up late finishing some math homework. My parents had been in bed for hours, although both are known for having occasional insomnia. I heard a door upstairs slam shut and heavy footsteps in the kitchen. It sounded like they had shoes on as well. I immediately assumed it was my dad having trouble sleeping, and I thought I should go up and keep him company. As I left my room, I got a funny feeling about it and instead locked myself in the bathroom with my cell phone. I called our landline. My father answered and sounding annoyed said, "What are you doing stomping around the kitchen?" They came downstairs to get me and together, we searched the entire house. We found absolutely no evidence of any intruder. All doors and windows were shut and locked, nothing broken, etc. Additionally, there was snow on the ground outside, but we found no footprints around the house and no mud or water in the kitchen where the intruder had been walking. The thing that made it most creepy to me was the disturbingly strong, "this isn't right" feeling I had as I left my room. It was at least once every few weeks that one of my parents would be up in the night from insomnia, and I, being a night owl, would always go up and join them. So hearing someone walking around the kitchen was completely normal. I sometimes wonder what would have happened or what I would have seen if I had ignored that feeling or hadn't felt it at all. Around 10 to 12 years ago, I was in high school and living with my mom who was recently divorced and my little brother. We would always hear something that resembled footsteps on the second floor of our house, always ending up making creaking noises and such in our mom's room, which I always attributed to the house settling and whatnot. Well, I would frequently stay up late into the wee hours of the morning, play PC games, watching TV, etc., and my mom who worked from home, had always been a night owl as well, would frequently work downstairs, either in our kitchen or a spare bedroom directly beneath me. Whenever she was in the downstairs bedroom, I would hear her talking to whomever she was dating or a friend, whatever. Not really hear her, just making out mumbling noises like you would expect from the second floor to the first. So this one night while I was on summer break, I was up late and I heard her all night long talking on the phone and thought it was odd that she would be up that late. There was no mistake about it. She was downstairs and chatting away at 2 to 3 a.m. and eventually around 4 a.m. I heard her come up the stairs and walk to her room to go to sleep. I ended up going to bed shortly after and didn't think anything of it. The next day, I wake up around 1 p.m. or so and go downstairs to get something to eat and drink, and she's downstairs in the kitchen doing some paperwork, and I mention to her, "Wow, you were up late last night, huh?" She replies back, "What do you mean?" And I tell her that I had heard her on the phone all night and go to bed shortly before I did. She looked confused and told me that she had gone to bed at around 9:30 p.m. because she had to meet a client of hers first thing in the morning. So I'm naturally feeling weird about the conversation and ask her, "Are you sure you went to bed that early? I swear I heard you up until at least 3 a.m. and I even heard you come up the stairs and go to bed." And she reassures me that she definitely had gone to sleep several hours prior. I didn't have my TV on, I was just playing a video game with the volume low so it wouldn't wake my brother in the next room, but I know that I heard talking and footsteps. That house always gave me the creeps for one reason or another, but that experience definitely topped the cake. We moved out shortly after that and I've never experienced anything like it. To begin with, I am as non-religious as it gets, and like any typical Redditor, don't believe in anything science can't explain to some extent. This is my only experience which still makes me question myself. I was around 6 years old at our old house. I shared a room with my sister at the time. Both of our beds touched the same wall and were separated by a nightstand. The room is square in shape and attached to the rest of the house via a longish corridor. My sister was around 4 at the time. I woke up sometime during the night, not sure when, I couldn't tell time, and must have been late since no one was awake and the highway from my room sounded rather empty of cars. As I fiddled about in my bed, I opened my eyes and looked towards my ceiling. I see 2 small children floating about 4 feet away from me. They were greenish in color and their edges were not well defined from space around them. They giggled as they noticed me noticing them. I didn't know and couldn't tell if that was a safe giggle. I decide I must be still shaky from sleep and close my eyes to continue sleep and make them disappear. I reopen my eyes and there they still were, slightly closer. I get real scared now. I repeat closing my eyes and there, they were closer. Now I freaked. They were about 2.5 feet away now. I jumped from my bed and I ran towards my door and the hallway. I paused at the door to see behind me. They gasped as I ran, and when I looked back, they had turned their heads to face me. I ran again, this time for my mom's bedroom. I jumped into her bed shaking and slept there. Till this day, I regret leaving my sister in there, but I was too afraid to have done anything else. I've told few people in my life about this. A cousin of a friend of mine independently told me a story she experienced as a child too, and without any knowledge of my experience, described the little floating children she saw as dim glowing green. I hate remembering this story. I'm late to this thread but screw it. This story was unveiled to me by my uncle when he was drunk. Whenever I ask him to repeat it, he tells me to stop asking, says that he doesn't want to talk about it, and thanks me for stopping him from sleeping that night. Needless to say, we don't bring it up very often. My uncle lived in an old English cottage, wooden beams, wonky ceilings, strange stairs and creaking floorboards, the works. He suffered from constant nightmares as a child, and they all seemed to be part of the same story. There would always be a boy that walked down his street in tattered clothes, went to the window and knocked on it. My uncle would look, causing the boy to scream. That was the point where my uncle would wake up. Wherever he was, the dream seemed to adapt, sleeping in a car window, camping, outside the tent. It all seemed a bit too coincidental that this same boy would keep appearing in all his dreams. This carried on until he was 14. He was in the car with his mother, sleeping, when the car crashed. He says he heard the same scream, the window smash, and then he woke up. They had ran into a boy, the same boy from the dreams, who proceeded to crash through the windscreen and land on his lap. His cold dying eyes fixed on my uncle as if he had seen him before, like he was death itself. That stare haunts my uncle and had to go through months of therapy to get over it. This story is actually from a friend's house, which was highly haunted. She always told me there was 4 spirits in her house, but I never believed her. On this night, her parents were out, and there was about 5 to 6 of us up in her bedroom with the lights low and dancing to music. We were like 11. All of a sudden, her dog starts going crazy, and we hear the voice of her dad screaming her name. We were soiling ourselves and ran down as fast as we could. When we get down there, we don't see a single person, but there's her dog going nuts at one corner of the room. We all run out the back door and onto the street, but I turn back to see that there's no car there and my friend hasn't came out yet. As I run back, she comes out in tears, saying something grabbed her and said her name. She stayed the rest of the night with me. Another few good stories from the house I lived in at that time. Once when we were having a sleepover, me and my friends had the lights out and were having a pillow fight. I remember hearing a gasp and looking up to see the figure of a man in a trench coat standing at the end of my room. I quickly flicked on the lights and everyone in that room saw the same thing. We also had a massive bathroom where there was an area blocked by the shower that you couldn't see when you were on the toilet. Every single person who ever stepped into that bathroom complained about feeling like there was something behind that shower. The sink and the mirror was just facing the shower, and when you were in front of it, you could see behind you. Same feeling. And if you ever took my dog into the bathroom with you, she would walk over to that area, sit down, and watch it like a hawk, giving a slight growl now and again until you left. WTF. Another of my sister's stories. Once when she had her friend over, she left to go to the toilet. As she left, she heard what sounded like a knock on the window, second level of the house. She walked back in and asked her friend if she had heard it. Her friend said it happened every time she left the room. They both ran into my room screaming. As a child, I was sick with an unknown illness. For months, I stayed in the hospital bedridden. With no hope in sight, my parents brought me home to lay on my deathbed. I was told I spoke in a language I shouldn't know to people who weren't alive anymore, relatives, friends, etc. My mother had brought in a priest and another person. I forget who, some expert, but main point is that they diagnosed my problem. I was made ill by the spirits who lived in the backyard, gnomes. I often played out there as if other people were there. Supposedly, they liked me so much that they wanted me to be with them. In order to cure me, my mother opted for a ritual presented by the expert. First the house was blessed, then some sort deal was made. To appease the gnomes, there was an offering of some kind. The backyard to be untouched, for my long hair to be cut, and something else. I woke up soon after with little to no memory of it. There are other details, but we moved out a couple of years later in the safety of the night. We just left and took whatever we could. Later on, I went with my father to gather things from the old house. I begged to come with him to see the house. I was very stubborn and missed my childhood home. We entered and all walls had drawings and words on them. I couldn't read at the time, but there was a tiny drawing at about eye level for me. The walls were filled, but there was a ring of untouched space, as if everything encircled that one spot. There, in the middle, was a drawing of a little man with white round eyes and a beard.